Sky News studios in Melbourne, live. The Bolt Report. Now, Andrew Bolt.
Europe is now panicking over the millions of Muslims it has let in, and the reaction has been extraordinary. It has been everything from shutting borders and turning back the boats to banning the full-face Islamic veil and shutting down mosques. And now, in Denmark, the government is even forcing parents in immigrant ghettos, mainly Muslim, to hand over their toddlers for reprogramming. Some would call this reaction ugly. Others would call it too late. But blame the European leaders who were asleep at the wheel for so long. Over the past decade, these leaders let in more than 5 million illegal immigrants, overwhelmingly from poor Muslim countries in Africa and the Middle East. These leaders apparently assumed that their borders, their cultures, did not need protecting. Or they lazily thought, well, Muslim immigrants from much poorer countries, they'd easily fit in. And so, when almost 1 million illegal immigrants poured into Germany in just 1 year, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, famously and foolishly told voters the country could handle this amazing invasion. Don't worry, I'm convinced, she said. We can do this.
Ich bin überzeugt, wir schaffen das.
Except Germany couldn't do it at all. Nein, wir schaffen das nicht. Like many European countries, Germany has had a shock. It has now suffered deadly terrorist attacks by Muslim asylum seekers, like the truck attack on Christmas shoppers in Berlin. Other asylum seekers stage Islamist attacks in Ansbach, Dresden, Würzburg, and others. There have been also multiple reports of asylum seekers attacking women. And last week, the German Chancellor, who once said, "Wir schaffen das, we can do this," was forced by her coalition partners to retreat. Merkel has now agreed to a new border regime on the Austrian frontier to turn back asylum seekers who have registered with some other European country. And across Europe, the borders are closing. Italy, in the last 2 weeks, turned away 3 rescue ships carrying illegal immigrants from Libya. And Austria threatens to close its own borders too. Hungary has already fenced off its border and last month made it a crime to help fake refugees file requests for asylum. But what to do with the millions of immigrants already in Europe? And there, Europe is taking some of the most aggressive measures to force more assimilation, if that can actually be done. For instance, there's the battle against the niqab, the full-face covering worn by Muslim women that, to me at least, symbolises a reluctance to integrate. The niqab has now been banned or restricted in France, in Austria, Holland, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Bulgaria, Bavaria, and parts of Italy and Switzerland. A lot of those countries were famously liberal. Holland has meanwhile scrapped multiculturalism, and Austria last month said it would close 8 radical mosques and expel 60 imams. But Denmark has gone even further. The Danish government now says that what's called ghetto children from 25 immigrant enclaves, heavily Muslim ones, poor ones, must be separated from their families once they turn 1. Separated to get at least 25 hours a week of lessons in Danish and Danish values. Parents who refuse will have their welfare cut. Don't think Europe will stop even there either. The millions of Muslims that let in will not leave, and any tensions imported with them will last for generations. And they won't end with some Danish lessons. So, is Europe's reaction now too ugly? Or does it all come too late? Joining me from Copenhagen to discuss this is Hans Redder, a journalist from Denmark's TV2 Politik. Hans, it's so good to have you join me. Now, can you tell me exactly what Denmark is wanting to do with these so-called ghetto children from immigrant suburbs?
Yes, the objective of the Danish government when proposing this legislation is that we have seen a problem in Denmark as well as in many other European countries, that some of the people living in these enclaves by Danish politicians called ghettos are not learning the Danish language, are not learning the Danish values, and are, as our Prime Minister says, behind on points when they are beginning in school, age 5 and 6. And that is why the Danish government, with backing from a majority in the parliament, proposes that they have to go to mandatory nursery or kindergarten from the age of 1. But for all other Danish people, for me and for my children, for example, it's voluntarily. I can choose not to have my children go in these nurseries, but if you live in one of these ghetto areas, you have to, otherwise your welfare benefits will be cut.
And why has the Danish government done this? What is the problem that the government thinks it needs to fix?
Well, as the Danish Prime Minister from the party Venstre, which is a centre-right party, he says that there are holes in the map of Denmark, there are cracks in the map of Denmark where Danish norms and values do not prevail, do not exist. And those are the roughly around 20 ghetto areas. And to combat that and to make these children, often from non-Western backgrounds, adopt the Danish values and the Danish language, you have to take these pretty harsh measures to enact that. And that is, as I said before, a position that is backed by a majority in the Danish parliament. The government is backed by the far-right Danish People's Party, who is very strict on immigration, and also by the big opposition party, the Social Democrats, which are centre-left. They are also adopting this very strict policy.
Now, Denmark, of course, has suffered, like so many European countries, from some Islamist terrorism. Thankfully, not as much as others, but you have had that. You've also had increasing concern about immigrant gangs, gang violence. Some are using automatic weapons and grenades. A lot of them recruiting from Muslim immigrants. Is this driving some of the public concern, and do these changes have public support?
It sure is the background for these proposals by the Danish government. In the last year, there have been a lot of examples of gang-related violence coming out of some of these areas. Sometimes last year we had almost daily shootings in areas of Copenhagen, and that is something that we are not used to in Denmark. It's very unnormal and rare that there are shootings in the streets, but the uptick in gang-related violence has led to a majority of the politicians wanting to enact on this. And this is something that concerns a lot of the Danish populations. In the last couple of elections, immigration policy has been one of the key deciding factors when Danish voters are to decide who to vote for. And in the upcoming election in Denmark, which is coming in around a year or so, that will surely be an important topic as well.
Hans Frede, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us from Copenhagen.